The reflex seems simple. Someone struggles, so someone is broken. Find the person, fix the person. What if the person was never the problem, and the fix was never in them? It was in the process all along. Hello, friends, and welcome to I Know I Belong When, an Innovation Unbiased production where bold voices, curious stories, and authentic impact amplify knowing that you are invited, seen, heard, and needed. Our conversations go from the boardrooms to the break rooms, from the sidewalks to our living rooms, from our relationships to ourselves. We explore the full spectrum of belonging, the joy of being seen, the pain of being left out, and the courage it takes to build spaces where every identity is welcomed, valued, and loved. We also hold space for each of our unique identities to joyfully prosper and thrive. I am your host, Christopher Bailone, someone who believes knowing you belong is a birthright. When a capable person struggles at work, most organizations ask the same question: what is wrong with them? Today's guest built an entire career on refusing to ask it. He walks into rooms full of HR leaders and flips the script. Stop interrogating your people and start interrogating your process. Because the meeting structure, the vague expectations, and the broken handoffs, those leave fingerprints. People just take the blame. Meet Grant Harris. Grant Harris, MBA, Certified Diversity Executive, is a neuro-inclusive speaker, a human-centered performance strategist, and the founder of GTH Consulting. His work builds on the foundation of Fix Your Process, Not Your People, which challenges people leaders to inspect the systems around a person before labeling them as the difficult, disengaged, not ready, or not a culture fit. Organizations like the Washington Post, PBS, ASICS, and the Virginia Military Institute have brought him in to do exactly that. Here is the part that earns a second listen. Grant is a late-diagnosed autistic leader. He knows firsthand what happens when a workplace rewards comfort, familiarity, and one default communication style, and then misreads everyone who operates differently. He turned that lived experience into a diagnostic lens, asking better questions about where performance breaks down and where the system makes harder than it needs to be. He is also a Hall of Fame athlete, a 3-time author, and a man who has memorized the flag of every country around the world. Pause on that. Every single one. This is someone who's seen patterns the rest of us just walk past. So before you label your next people problem, consider the problem might be wearing a process costume. Grant Harris, welcome to I Know I Belong When.
Christopher, great to be here. That was one of the best intros I've ever had. I appreciate that.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm just taking what you have provided and turned it around into just a fun little script that we get to learn more about you before we dive into the conversation. So let's dive into it, friend. You tell leaders to fix the process, not the people. For the listener hearing that phrase for the first time, what is the one misread happening in their workplace right now that they probably do not see?
Excellent question, and I thank you for the opportunity. So fix your process, not your people, is a subset of my focus, which is human-centered performance. And human-centered performance is when we stop blaming people as the problem, when we start looking at processes as the problem. And when we ask the question, instead of Christopher is to blame or the person in the organization is to blame, we start asking this question: what part of the process made this outcome possible? What part of the process made this outcome possible? Instead of what did Christopher do or not do?
Right.
Why is Christopher not performing? Why is Christopher acting that way? Why is Christopher reacting that way? So that's the human-centered performance. And we look at the systems and the design around the people that are influencing how they act and operate and perform. So that's first and foremost, human-centered performance. Fix your process, not your people is not about generic DEI. It is not about generic Lean Six Sigma. It is not about generic workflow and processes, because that does not put humans at the center of performance, of productivity, and ultimately profit. So it is about action over awareness. It is about agency over advocacy. And awareness and advocacy are extremely important. They are just not the lanes that I am in. Everyone has their lane, and the lane that I am in is about action and how on Monday can we redesign work so that, again, the focus is on the process and not the people.
Yeah.
That's my lane, Christopher.
What a great lane to be in. And you're speaking my love language, because it's all about the process, the practice. And I also talk about the policy, right? What are the systems and how are they designed and how are they allowing people to show up at work, in community? And so I love the fact that you take the focus away from the person. One of the things I was thinking about as you were saying that is also about the external pressures that are outside of work that impact the person, right? The work is very focused on what can the workplace control. However, it's also taking a little bit of a step back and what is the system, the society that may be causing somebody to react this way. And there might be some external pressures that an organization might not can control. However, they have to take it into account to see how they can best serve that individual to make sure that they can be the best leader possible.
Yes. So the external always influences the internal. So you have caregivers, you have a multi-generational workforce, you have societal expectations, and then you turn that internally, and those become unclear expectations. Right. Those become missed handoffs. That becomes misunderstandings, miscommunication, misinformation, disinformation. And these things create what we call friction.
Yep.
And friction is not, it's interesting, Chris, I talk more about what my work is not than what it is, because it's easy to misconstrue and misunderstand. So I spend a lot of time talking about it's not this.
Right.
It's not all that 80% over there. It's this 20% over here. So the workplace friction is commonly misconstrued and misunderstood as I have a problem with Christopher and we're having interpersonal problems and we argue and potentially get into an altercation. That's employee relations. That's not workplace friction. That's not the friction that I am talking about. I'm talking about the friction that happens when you set foot in the door for day one, or when you log on to the computer for day one, and the systems and how they are set up in onboarding, in recruiting, in retention. They decide and they manipulate how people feel, how they show up, how they operate, and it either catapults them or it debilitates them. And again, it's not about just, well, how does Christopher feel this day? Feelings are important, but it's more about how the process is set up that creates the opportunity for Chris to feel a certain way. So that's where that work is. And I make lots of distinctions online when I post on LinkedIn, and I have comments with HR and L&D and ERG leaders about how much of this work is not what people might think that it is. Right. So workplace friction has nothing to do with the interpersonal play. It has everything to do with how the operating system, the cadence, the rhythm of work affects people. And when I say how it affects people, it's everything from, oh, I'm happy today at work, to I'm crying in the bathroom at lunch, to I sitting in the parking lot for half an hour before I come into that meeting. Or in the remote environment, it's the fact that I have a 4-hour meeting on Saturday to talk about the same thing that we were talking about on Monday. And there's no clear decision. Right. There's no clear handoff. There's no clarity on roles. Who's making this decision? Why are they making this decision? Who's involved in making the decision? How is that decision getting communicated to the other people that it affects? This is workplace friction, Christopher.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where my focus lies.
And that's beautiful and so needed. So Grant, now I want to start taking this conversation more about you as the human, and so people can learn about who Grant is. So before the keynotes and the consulting business, it was just Grant Harris. Tell us where your name came from, who gave it to you, what does it carry, and is there a moment when hearing it said correctly or incorrectly told you something about the room you are in?
So my name is hard to mess up.
That's true.
I've never really heard it stated incorrectly. Grant and Harris are English surnames, to the best of my knowledge. And I researched this before our call. Grant is an English name. Harris is an English surname. Unfortunately, many black people in this country do not know their roots. I know we're not here to talk about slavery and all of that, but that's the reality. Many of us don't know where we come from and can't trace our lineage like many of our counterparts. And I'm one of those people. My father has tried in his own ways and only gotten so far. So the first and the last name are English name. Grant, to my knowledge, means great, which is great.
It is.
That's good. I do know that my parents named me and my two older sisters names that could not be shortened on purpose, which I appreciate. My children all have names that can be shortened, and everyone in the family shortens their name at some point, but I'm the only one that doesn't. So they did name us names that could not be shortened. They didn't want people going around calling me Tim if my name is Timothy, or Chris if my name is Christopher. They didn't want us to have to carry that burden and weight through life. So I do know that. I do know that my mother at one point wanted to name me Vladimir. I'm glad that she didn't. Not because Vladimir is a bad name, but I am black. But I'm like, Mom, we're not like Haitian. I don't know what Vladimir, where did that come from? So, and I say that because I do know a Haitian named Vladimir. So I'm allowed to say that. But fortunately, my father talked her out of that. Thomas, my middle name, comes from my grandfather or my maternal grandfather, whom I never met. Apparently, I look like him. Apparently, I get my hairline or my non-existent hairline from him. So Thomas was my mother's father, and that's where Thomas comes from. I can't extend that to my son. My son's middle name is Wesley, who is my father's father. On the paternal side. But that's where my name comes from. I have not gotten it butchered because it's easy. It's hard to mess up. As a kid, I did get teased a bit. And now I look at it, it was like stupid, but it was like kids. They didn't have anywhere else to go with the name.
Right.
Like Grant the Ant. It's like, yeah, Grant the Ant. Okay. But like, yeah. So, but other than that, I'm blessed to have a name that people don't butcher. And I'm blessed to have a name that is strong in stature. Yes. But that's where my name comes from as far as I know.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I also can appreciate the wanting to not have a name that is shortened. As somebody who I go by Christopher, if somebody calls me Chris, I'm assuming they're not talking to me. But I think it's one of those things where that's why I asked the question, right? Was where does your name come from? And I think it's also really powerful to talk about and opening my eyes a little bit more, especially for my friends and colleagues from the Black community, not knowing where your lineage comes from sometimes because of the naming and how your first and last name came to be. And so you can't always trace it. But that's a really powerful story to be able to share and for people to understand that aspect of you. It might not be the most positive aspect, but it is definitely part of your lived experience. Okay, friend. So now I want to take you to the moment that you knew you belonged. Take us to that specific moment, not when someone told you belonged, but when you knew it to your core. Where were you and what made it unmistakable?
So I spent some time thinking about this question. And for those of you who don't know me or haven't seen any of my conversations online, I have a before and after in life. And that was before I knew about being autistic and after I knew. I've only known about being autistic for maybe the last 4 years now. And I only publicly spoke about being autistic maybe 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. So it's still fresh, comparatively speaking. So the time I knew I belonged is after I knew, and the most recent time was last October. And I was speaking at a conference. in Arizona in front of a group of hundreds of my people. And that was the first time that I kind of used that phrase, my people, because most people in that room were either neurodivergent or knew someone who was, or had some type of affinity. And at that point in time, I hadn't been around that many people at that scale and had the opportunity to speak about that particular topic in that room. And I remember that was one of the first times since being public and since my formal diagnosis of saying I'm in a room with my people. And I knew that I could do that because I made an autism joke opening my speech. And I was comfortable doing that. And I literally said, I'm in a room where, like meets like, and this is good to go. And I know that this will land okay. So, and I made an autism joke. And that was the first time that I'd done that in public. And after that, there were other presenters, other speakers, and I sat around with the people who invited me and the people that were attending and folks that I had been interacting with online but had not been able to meet them in person. And it was just clear that everybody there was open and honest and perfectly fine with being different and thinking differently and showing up differently. And that was one of the first times that I really felt like didn't have to consciously hide anything, didn't have to retract anything, didn't have to hold back anything, and know that the people around me were doing the same. So that was last October, and it might be curious that it took that long, but it did. Yeah.
Well, everybody's on their own path, right? Everybody's on their own journey.
Yeah.
So you talk about the before and after. So what did you finally be able to stop doing after your diagnosis and even in that moment when you're in front of a group of people who you say are your people? What were you able to stop doing? What mask or extra effort were you able to let go and take off? And what did people get to finally see that they missed otherwise?
Well, the last part you would have to ask other people, or except for my family. They tell me what was missing or what was before, but I can't say what other people were missing, but I can tell you what I was missing, and I can tell you the difference. So during that transition of before and after, now I know, and I didn't know before, so some of these things I never would have said or thought before because I didn't know that I was showing autistic traits. But now my language, my vocabulary, my experience, my interactions, much different. So I'm much more comfortable, which I know is highly privileged, in saying, well, this is how my brain works. This is how I show up. I communicate this way. I speak this way. And turning that, not turning it, presenting that in a positive way. Presenting organization and structure in a positive way versus rigidity and uptightness from what everyone would have said before. Turning the ability to dots that either don't exist or seemingly don't exist, and turning that into how my brain functions and how I can connect Christopher with this thing over here that doesn't make any sense. And previously it'd be like, why are you talking about that? That has nothing to do with this. But now it's like, oh, your brain, this is from my family, and I see how your brain works and how it makes that connection, because I never would have done that before. So things like that, personally, I have been able to present them as positive, and other people have not only, and not saying that the things aren't still frustrating, it's still life, but they're not only looking at them as negative. Oh, Christopher, yeah, if you call me day of to go have lunch in like 2 hours, that's going to piss me off, because like you could have called me 2 days ago to tell me that we wanted to have lunch, and I could have scheduled that. And in the past, people that I know and people in my family, all that, and they're like, well, Grant doesn't like it and he's rigid and he's not going to be flexible. I'm like, well, dude, you told me like you're just calling me out of the blue the same day and you want to go eat in like 2 hours. That's not how I operate. Obviously now I know how I operate, and other people do too, and I try to meet them halfway. But I'm able to communicate those things now. Before, I wasn't able to communicate it because I was just living in it and I was just frustrated. And I was like, okay, I'll do it because I love you. But the whole time, I'm like, I don't want to be here because like people,
there's a calendar for a reason.
So those kind of things. Yeah. So those types of things I see specifically. And from a work perspective, that's interpersonal, that's family, which is
Yep.
close to the heart. From a work perspective, many instances where I was seen as bull in a china shop because I was being either direct with my communication and telling leaders that I see this thing or the opportunity to improve this thing and to make it better, to make it more effective and efficient. And that's how I saw it. I saw it as more effective and more efficient. I didn't necessarily have the language to use that at the time. I was just like, hey, like, why don't we do this? And coming up with all of these ideas because I'm seeing the system is less effective and less efficient than it could
Right.
be. But people who created that system, because I work with leaders and I've always been working with the people that are making decisions, and they didn't say so specifically, but either they were offended, they didn't like how I said it, I was too young to bring it. I'm a black man telling a white woman, I'm a black man telling an Asian woman, in all of these interpersonal things that I wasn't necessarily thinking about at the time that I know affected those situations now. These types of things are on both sides, the positive and the negative.
It's really powerful, I think, because a lot of times when we are not aware of who we are and we're just reacting, we also can't tell people how to help us, right? And if we are able to communicate with
Correct.
others to say, look, if you want my best self, don't call me day of for lunch, right? I need a plan. And that is a way
Yeah.
that when we know that about ourselves, we're able to communicate to the world around us so that folks can help us be the best version of ourselves.
Correct. And this applies to the workplace. I always bring it back to the workplace and giving people the opportunity, and leaders and managers giving people the opportunity to say, well, this is how I operate. This is how my brain
Yep.
works. This is how I show up. This is how I see success. Defining those expectations early and through clarity versus defining and refining those versus making them declarative. This is what you should be. This is how we operate. This is what we do. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't have its
Correct.
place. If you're machinery, this is how this machinery works. ABC 1, 2, 3. Safety first, get it? But when it comes to how people are compensated, how people, their career trajectory, promotions, lateral movement for whatever reason, not everybody wants to be promoted.
Right.
Not everybody wants to be a people leader. Not everybody wants to be a manager. Not everybody wants that title, and that's okay. But if you don't know that, and if you don't ask about that, and your operating system is when you come into an organization, Christopher, you have this title. You're supposed to have the next title in a certain amount of years. You're supposed to have the next responsibility in a certain amount of years. There's clarity with that, but there's also restriction
Yes.
with that because Christopher might not want that.
Correct.
So leadership and management says, okay, here's a path that we have created. And if you want to follow this path, great, we can do that for you. But if you want your own path, and if you need your own path, help me help you create
Correct.
that path. That's where the conversation should
Absolutely.
be, which reduces the friction and increases retention, reduces avoidable attrition because we know, and I'm not big on throwing out stats, I can do that, but people, their eyes start to water when you throw too many numbers
Right.
at them. But we know the stats when it comes to autistic people being and underemployed,
Correct.
the majority, the vast majority. And I've been there in my life multiple times. We know the stats when it comes to loneliness, and people who are more lonely are more likely to be neurodivergent and or people of color all at
Yep.
the same time. And loneliness doesn't just apply to, it applies to this AI world
Yes.
too. And I had this conversation in a different podcast about how black people, and especially black women, are very lonely when it comes to AI because we're one of the first adopters. Black people in general are one of the first adopters of AI. Black women specifically are one of the first adopters, but we're learning it on our own. We're not being taught the way that our counterparts are being taught. And I'll bring it home in a second, connecting the dots, like I said. So we're not being taught those things. And you have this subset of people dealing with this massive transitionary system, and they're feeling alone on top of all the other things that they have to deal with in a
Yep.
workplace, which cause what we say, again, friction. So you have all of this friction, and we need to move from friction to flow. And that's my 4-step process. I won't get in the weeds with that, but friction to flow is the idea. And when we're in a flow state, operating rhythm, operating cadence, the way people show up. It's not perfect.
No.
Never said anything about perfect. I did say about flow and removing the bottlenecks,
Right.
and removing the barriers and the hindrances so that Christopher and Grant and everyone else, no matter their title, no matter their tenure, no matter their career trajectory, have what they need in order to be effective and efficient and perform well. And there's a difference, Chris. So when I talk about performance, I'm going to talk about there's performing and then there's performative. Performing is you're doing well.
Yep.
You're progressing. You're hitting milestones. Performative is showing up at the meeting, actually burning people out, and it's creating exhaustion because we're talking about the same thing over and over again, or I don't even get to say anything in that meeting because nobody wants to hear my opinion, which is a form of burnout in and of itself. So I digress, but these are the things that I talk about and teach and practice in the workplace.
Absolutely. And it's really important, one, that you brought up about it's not about being perfect, right? It's something that I've also just personally had to lean into is my own imperfection. And how are we making sure that we're creating environments where people know that imperfection is okay? And that's actually probably where a lot of the creative genius we get is in the imperfect moments. So I want to take this conversation in a little bit of a different direction. It would not be the I Know I Belong When podcast if we did not talk about how we navigated non-belonging. So tell us about a moment when your capability was misread, a time when the environment was not designed to interpret what you brought to it. What happened?
I think I mentioned a couple of those, maybe indirectly, being a bull in a china shop and my communication style. But there was one story I always go back to early on in my career. I was management consulting. I come from consulting industry. I do not come from HR. All you HR leaders out there, I want to make this point known. I don't come from HR, and I'm proud of that. I've had one HR related role in my career that I had an HR title. So I don't come from HR, but I believe that gives me a different perspective and angle, and I'm able to say things that HR people probably wouldn't say, but they're thinking it anyway. So I just want to make that point. So I come from management consulting. I come from a consulting world, and I was client facing earlier on in my career with a government GS-15. And if you're not familiar with those terms, a high level government employee. And I was given a task, and she said, go off and work. I don't remember the task, but it was work. I was earning a paycheck, and I came back like the same day, and I was like, here's my work. Because at that time, I got a clearly defined task. I had a clearly defined timetable in my mind. And I was effective and efficient in getting that work done. And I brought it back. And she said to me, she was like, whoa. She was like, basically pump the brakes. It's good enough for government work. You don't have to she basically said, you don't have to do work that quickly just because I give it to you. And I was like, what? I don't understand. You gave me a task. You said I should do this thing. And in my brain, I go do that thing. I come back to you. Give me the next task. I'm very task oriented.
Right.
Have always been task oriented. So that hit me kind of early in my career. I was like, I don't understand why I wouldn't do something that someone asked me to do. And if I did it on time and if I did it effectively and efficiently, why that person wouldn't want it back and why they would be like, oh, that's not how we do it here. She didn't say that, but that's what she was saying. So that was early on.
It's one of those, you're making us look bad.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And then throughout the bull in the china shop, the direct communication, the, hey, we could do this thing better. We can make this process better. There are multiple instances that led to PIPs, personal or professional improvement plans, if you're not familiar with that term, led to short stints. Technically, Christopher, I've said this in private conversations, I have not held a job for longer than 3 years. And that's not unusual in the neurodivergent community. I take accountability for my portion and my part of those things, but it's not uncommon for people in the neurodivergent community to have extremely short stints. I've had 3 or 4 careers in my time. So, and on all of those instances, the level of communication, the level of interaction was always friction.
Right.
And I didn't really know what it was or what to call it and these kind of things. But in most corporate environments, I had that until I got into the entrepreneurial game. And less friction, more flow.
Yeah, exactly. So One of the things through this conversation we've had so far, a theme that kind of keeps coming up is in the before and after. It's almost where it was like at one point, until you had the language, it was you were seeing it as that you were the problem. And when did you start understanding the system was not designed for you and there were unclear expectations, there were hidden communication rules instead of it being personal failure? And so, how did you navigate through that?
That most likely started around the time that I was in education.
Mm,
I spent some time as a special educator. I taught autistic kids before I knew I was autistic,
mm,
which was interesting. Majority minority, English as a second language, high free and reduced lunch environment, most restricted environment, working with the kids that basically stayed in one classroom for 90% of their educational
mm.
experience, and being the only black male teacher on staff at the time. These kind of things. And then with the families, seeing what's happening with them at home, understanding the level or the lack of parenting at home, the multiple responsibilities of children at a young age, and looking at IEPs and how those things are set up, individual education plans, if you're not familiar in the education space. So having all of that and looking at it from a systems perspective, I was like, it ain't always the people
Right.
in the middle. There are all these other circumstances and barriers that are hindering and traps. And I say barriers is nice. Traps, sinkholes,
Yep.
quicksand, all of these things that affect people. Now, I wasn't necessarily looking at it from my point of view at that time, but that's when I started seeing the external versus just the internal versus, okay, you told me to do this, I should do it. Why are you telling me? Like, it was always like me. But then that opened up the diaspora to these other factors
Right.
that affect people. And then as I moved through and learned more about myself, that's when I started thinking about the systems overall. I have always been a systems thinker, but the system had always been, well, how do I make this thing that I'm responsible for better? Okay, that's one level of systems, but that's the individual. And then I moved through the structural into the institutional, and where I am now is the institutional levels of how these systems are set up. So that took time, but that's where it started.
So when we think about how we are modeling the way that we want belonging or people to know that they belong in the workplace or society in general, how did you learn to look at the system first when everything in the workplace trains us to look at the person?
Well, nothing can be right all the time. So if everything, and I'm a bit of a contrarian thinker, I've always been a loner. I never joined the crowd just because. I only went to my high school prom because I had a girlfriend at the time and I wanted to keep her. It wasn't ever like all these people are doing something, so it must be the right thing and the cool thing to do. Like internally, I was never like that. So I was always a contrarian thinker, and I'm perfectly fine alone because that's my introversion. So I think the combination of being an autistic introvert has given me the traits to be okay with thinking differently than the right, thinking opposite, and being okay with that and being like, all right, cool. If you don't want to hang out with me, that's cool, because I probably don't want to hang out with you either. So I think that led to some of that.
Yep.
So I'm looking at all these things like, well, everybody says is this, and every experience I've had is that, and I'm like, that can't be right all the time. So there has to be something else happening. And that's when it was not a light switch. I've never had a light switch moment in my life. It's always been over time. But yeah, when I started to see that everybody's doing it this way, my personal experience is turning out the same way. The communication that I'm having in these corporate environments is going the same way. They're reacting the same way to me. Then it can't just all be me. It has to be these other things that are involved. I'm part of that,
Right.
because I'm part of the puzzle, but it ain't all me. So those are the experiences and the times that I began to think about the system overall and not just me at the middle of it.
Well, that's really great. I mean, we also have to make sure that we understand that we are in the middle of our own universe, right? We have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and making sure that we're whole before we can take care of others. Sometimes I even think about when somebody says, how are you viewing the world around you and how are you making sure that you're caring about others? And I think it's really about that we are needing to understand the systems and how they operate, and that contrarian attitude, I like to call it the sage rebel, and how are we challenging the status quo and the process to make sure that we're actually thinking about who the system is actually impacting and not just taking it for granted that the system's working. So I truly, really appreciate that perspective. So I have a fun bonus question for you before we close out the show. So the top of the show, we talked about how you memorized every flag around the world. So if you had to pick one flag purely based on the visual, no geopolitics, no history, just design, which one matches your personality and why?
Excellent question. No one has ever asked me that before. I think in roadmaps. So I'll share a little bit about my thinking. You could probably see behind me that I'm a Carolina Tar fan.
I can see that.
And that's only part of my wall and part of my collection. But I've always been a big UNC fan. Carolina blue is my favorite color. So there are a handful of flags, about 3 or 4 of them, that have prominent Carolina blue in them. And they happen to be in either Central America or South America. So I have not been to Argentina. I would like to go. I'm not a big soccer fan, although I know it's a World Cup. But I like the Argentinian flag because it has a lot of Carolina blue in it.
Fair.
So it's clearly just affinity for that color because it's the color of the sky. It's the color closest to heaven and all that good stuff. So any flag that has a significant amount of Carolina blue in it, I've always been a fan. That would include others like Guatemala, Argentina. A couple others have prominent Carolina blue in them. But if I had to pick one, it would probably be based on color and not necessarily design. But when it comes to design, I prefer less is more. I'm a less is more kind of guy. So I like the flags that are less is more. There are plenty of flags that it's all about more is more.
Yep.
South Africa and Uganda and others is like, everything is in there. And there's reasons for that, which is great. And there's reasons for including that. But I prefer minimalist flags in general. And I prefer flags that have Carolina blue in them. So I would probably say Argentina.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. You know, one of my favorite musicals comes from Argentina, Evita.
Evita, yeah.
Having a little bit of affinity there. Okay, so as we start to close out the show, a call to action. What is the one thing you want every listener to do this week in their very next meeting or one-on-one to catch a misread before it costs somebody something?
So I'll talk from 2 perspectives. And I want to be sure that people understand that employees, subordinates, etc., can also misread people. It's not just a one-lane thing. However, the people in charge have the power and the authority over compensation and promotion and all of these things, which is why I focus on them. But we're a people, and employees have just as much responsibility in this as other people, but they don't have as much power and authority.
Correct.
So I'm talking to the people that have the power and the authority. Monday, look at one interview process, interview habit, meeting norm, or promotion signal that rewards what I call comfort over capability, and delete that. Wherever it exists. If it's in your policy, delete it. If it's in your one-to-one conversation, delete it. If it's in the bathroom stall, chit-chat, delete it. If it has something to do with the way it's always been done, it's legacy, if it's tradition, if it's, again, always been done, you should probably be looking at that thing. And wondering and being curious about, okay, we've been doing this for a very long time. Is it the best way to go? Is it effective? Is it efficient? Is it effective? Does it get the job done? Does it do what it's supposed to do? Is it efficient? Does it have the minimal effect on time, talent, and treasure possible? And if it doesn't, or if it's affecting those things negatively, then delete it on Monday. So that is my one charge to people that not only have the responsibility, but are in a position of power and authority and hold that power and authority over other people, is to look at a norm, look at a tradition, look at a legacy, ask if it's effective and efficient, ask if it's rewarding your level of comfort. This makes me feel good over someone else's capability, and delete it.
No, that's accountability right there, my friend. Right? Is how are we holding ourselves accountable to the process, the policies, the process, and the practice that we put in place. Okay, we have now come to the end of our recorded conversation. Grant, you have spent your career proving that when capable people struggle, the process usually leaves the fingerprints. You have taught rooms full of leaders to interrogate the system before they interrogate the person. However, this is your moment. No keynote, no diagnostic, no MBA after your name, just you, finishing the sentence that closes our show. I know I belong when?
I know I belong when I can be me. If I can be me in all the ways that I know to be me, in all the ways that I am aware in my conscious to be me, in all the ways that I am comfortable in being me, internally and externally, if I can be me in that environment for at least a moment. The goal is to be me all the time. Yeah. Like, that's the goal. We're still working towards that. But if I can have that for a moment, I know in that moment, then I belong. Yeah, so I know I belong when I can be me.
Thank you for that. What was coming through my mind as you were saying that is Virginia Woolf's I Am Me and I Am Okay poem, which is one that I look at all the time. Grant, thank you so much for this conversation. I truly appreciate you being here, showing up as your authentic self. It's been truly a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Christopher. Appreciate it.
This has been a great reminder that belonging is not a destination. It is a practice, and it starts with listening. Friends, if this episode challenged you to move outside your comfort zone, please follow our show and give us that 5-star review you know you want to give, and add a comment about what you will do to champion a culture of belonging. These actions will help to amplify the message to others so they too can find their own moment of belonging. Whether it is navigating the complexities of workplace culture, finding acceptance in a new school, building trust in a local community, or forging identities within our own families, these stories reflect the raw, honest, and unfiltered journeys each of us take every day. And we want to hear from you. Finish the sentence, I know I belong when, and send us a voice note. Your story could open a future episode. Thank you for listening. Know that your bold, authentic self is welcomed, valued, and loved. And until next time, remember, you belong here.